everyone. Today I'm going to look at CEI Camber Energy. I'm going to break down the recent 8K filing. So this was released yesterday. We're going to dive into what it means, as well as how it might impact Camber Energy moving forward. I'll make it quick. Just want to highlight kind of the key points. What's interesting to note is 8K filings are quite important. If you're not aware of them, definitely check them out. Really, an 8K filing lets you know any type of material event that the company experiences. So it's something that I like to keep an eye on, and being able to understand what's going on in an 8K helps give you a good sense of what's going on within the business. So let's dive right into it. So Camber Energy filed this 8K filing yesterday. It shows that they have received a $100 million investment. But what we're going to look at is how this actually impacts Camber as well as the business moving forward. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, what is an 8K filing? Essentially, it's used to update investors and the SEC about significant events affecting a company. So any type of material event that might impact the company and ultimately impact the share price, they have to disclose it through the SEC, and then obviously as investors you can read about it. So why don't we jump into the actual 8K filing itself and break down what this means. So looking at the filing itself, it'll just go point by point. The first point is that the company and an accredited institutional investor entered into a stock purchase agreement in which the investor purchased from the company 10,544 shares of newly designated Series G redeemable convertible preferred stock. So this is important. Just keep in mind of this Series G as we walk through this. So essentially the value of the Series G preferred stock is $10,000 per share, aggregate price of $100 million, which means that this institutional investor is essentially committed to investing $100 million into CEI. So if we break this down, $100 million aggregate price divided by the shares issued, which is 10,554, we see an equivalent Series G price of $9,484 per share. The next note is the purchase price. So CEI received a payment of $5 million in cash for these shares, as well as 4 promissory notes. So the investor is essentially paying the remaining amount at 1, 2, 3, 4 dates down the line. So what is a promissory note? In terms of their legal enforceability, promissory note lies somewhere in between informality of an IOU and the rigidity of a loan contract. So the way I interpret this is, the investor will come through and pay the money. There's likely legal repercussions if they don't end up buying the remaining Series G shares. But with that being said, it's a little bit open to interpretation. Okay, so there are 2,636 shares of Series G preferred stock associated with each note. So that means for each note, they receive 2,636 shares of Series G stock. The next point on the 8K filing mentions that the investor may not convert the preferred shares of preferred stock associated with each note. And ultimately, it's saying that unless the note is paid in full, they can't convert it into common stock, which makes sense. There'd be no reason for CEI to issue the common stock, convert the Series G to common stock without receiving the payment. The next point talks about the company, so CEI may in its sole discretion redeem the 2,636 shares of Series G preferred stock. But in order to do that, they'd have to pay the investor $1,375,000 in order to redeem that. So essentially, they can buy back the shares by paying the investor. And if we break it down to purchase these Series G shares, essentially CEI is paying an equivalent value of $521 per Series G share. Okay, the last main kind of paragraph in the 8K filing talks about how CEI has already, and this was on March 10th, so yesterday, paid the investor $1.375 million and has redeemed 2,636 shares of Series G preferred stock. So what does this mean? And I think this is broken down quite nicely. So the biggest thing that is missing is what is the conversion of the Series G shares to common shares? Because ultimately that tells us what the price per share that this institutional investor is getting these shares at. So for instance, if one Series G share converted into 10,000 common shares, the investor would have paid an equivalent of 95 cents per share. So that would be, a decent capital raise for CEI at that share price. But maybe it converts into 15,000 shares, and at that point, it's kind of undervaluing the share price for CEI. And really, there's two aspects that stand out. One is, why is CEI buying back some of these Series G shares? Assume that the structure of the Series G share is beneficial for the institutional investor, and if CEI likes the stock price where it is right now, they don't want to give this institutional investor a significant discount on the share price. But really the biggest thing that we are missing is the structure of the Series G shares. Once the 10K is released, they typically explain the structure of the various series shares. As it's mentioned here, there's already some outstanding Series C, Series F shares, but no Series G. So what does this ultimately mean for the CEI? It's tough to tell until we see the Series G structure. I'd say, and I'd agree with this, overall it's a good sign that an institutional investor is essentially committed a $100 million investment to CEI. The question is, what are the clauses, what is the structure of the Series G, and at what rate are they getting the common stock at? Because if the institutional investor is getting common shares of CEI at 50 cents per share equivalent, that's not a great look for us as shareholders. But if they're converting at $1 a share, then that's a pretty good raise. So just something to keep an eye on. As I said, 8K filings, super important. Want to keep an eye on them, and it's extremely helpful to be able to break it down and understand what's going on as an investor. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Links to this article are below, and happy investing.